get right into it. So today we're going to be talking about, I'm asking a question, what we talking, right? Reimagining the practice of young adult ministry through a pedagogy of engagement, right? So a little bit about me. I'm an educator. I am a faith leader. I am a scholar. So as an educator, I serve as the director of student support services for a charter high school here in Brooklyn, New York. As a faith leader, I am the co-minister to the Young Adult and College Ministry at the Greater Allen Cathedral of New York, Greater Allen AME Cathedral of New York. And I'm a scholar, hold the Bachelor of Arts in Criminal Justice, MDiv, MA in Religious Education. And in the fall, I will begin my doctoral studies at Fordham University, where I'll be majoring in education with an emphasis in supervision, leadership, and administration. So yeah, that's about me. Before I move forward, I want to thank the amazing, phenomenal minds behind this conference, LaKesha and Quinita. Forgive me if I'm saying it wrong. Thank you for just your vision and just being adaptive leaders during this time and just thinking of creative ways on how we can engage and educate one another and just move the church forward, even in this state that we're in, right? Session description, right? Just to give you a background and just a nutshell, what we'll be talking about today. So this session will specifically define and highlight a pedagogy of engagement, its healthy integration within ministry programming, and the ways it might serve as a framework essential to the increase and encouragement of young adult engagement in faith spaces and spiritual practices. So points to ponder as we maneuver through our conversation. I want those of us who lead young adults in any capacity to consider these questions later on. When we're done, we'll circle back. I'll circle back with a Google form where you can answer these questions for me. But I want you to consider these questions as we maneuver through these through this presentation this afternoon. How are we doing, right? If you think about your young adult ministry, how is it doing, right? Think about what are you doing, right? Is it working? And where are we going? Where are we headed, right? So let's just dive right into this. Let's just dive right in, right? So stats, right? I always like to give stats, right? So stats, according to, let me move this over. According to Barna Research Group, which is an amazing group who does a lot of work essentially around within faith spaces, right? So according to the Barna Research Group, 47% of American millennials aren't engaged in ministry programming catered to their demographic, right? They are, and what this research specifically highlights is that, young people's participation in faith spaces, and they highlight the role they believe ministry should be playing, young adult ministry should be playing in the lives of young people. So that's nearly half of millennials across the world between the ages of 18 and 33. Now, because it says American millennials, that can, the ethnicity can vary. I'm not sure. I didn't get the number of how many of those individuals are Black, but a number of the young people within our context are Black young people. So the number is still fairly large that young people are not engaged in the ministry programming that is catered to their demographic, right? So let's unpack this whole notion of pedagogy of engagement, right? So as an educator, I am always utilizing the term and the practice of pedagogy, right? Essentially pedagogy of engagement, right? So engaged pedagogy is a concept and a framework developed by Bell Hooks, an American educator who utilizes this framework within the context of schools, right? I adopted this framework and utilized it not just in my vocation, but within my ministry practice with youth and young adults, right? The whole notion of pedagogy of engagement is an approach, right? Again, that Bell Hook utilizes and emphasize it as a tool of engagement in academic settings, right? Hooks argues that we learn best when there is an interactive relationship between the student and teacher, right? In this case, as it relates to young adult ministry, that there is an interactive relationship between the leader and those who follows, right? As leaders, we must take the time out to discover what the young people already know and what they need to know, right? This discovery doesn't, Hook suggests, doesn't only make possible for us to have exchanges, but it gives us an opportunity to deliberately engage young people beyond surface level, right? And when I say beyond surface level, beyond church, beyond the traditional framework, right? As leaders, right, we create the climax, right? Even as one who teaches, I create the climax of what learning is going to look like, right? As a leader, as a ministry leader, I create the climate for what ministry is going to look like, right? And in my approach to leadership and including and integrating this notion of engaged pedagogy, I have to make sure that I am aware of the emotional intelligence that is that resonates within the lives of young people, right? This means that we need to take time to assess, evaluate, and get to know the people that we lead, right? So in this whole notion, right? So what Bell Hooks is suggesting, right, around this whole framework of pedagogy of engagement, and which I have adapted. Again, I kind of just added my own little fluff to it, that young adult ministry should be inviting, right? It should include those the work is designed for, right? Your work, our work within young adult ministry, right, is not effective, right, if it does not include those that the work is for, right? We cannot be doing young adult ministry and programming and we're not including those that we lead in the process, right? The work is for young adults, so it should include young adults, right? It has to be intentional, right? Intentionality, according to me, is my philosophy, right? Intentionality is felt and seen, right? So programming should be not just purposeful, but personal, right? That we're curating programming that is linked to the lived experience and the realities of young people, right? We're living in a time today where Black and brown bodies do not matter, right? Ministry programs to suggest and advocate for Black and brown bodies, especially within the context of faith spaces, right? So we have to be intentional in creating programming that is linked to the lived experience and realities of young people, of young adults. I'm using the terms simultaneously, interchangeably. They mean the same. We're talking about young adults, right? Interactive, right? Create open and safe space where exchange can be made and faith can be fostered, right? Welcoming young people to do the work with you, right? Collaboration, right? The whole notion around interaction, interactive ministry is inviting young people to collaborate with you, right? Collaboration is key for the continuity of your ministry, of your programming, right? If there's not ongoing collaboration between you and the people that you lead, the continuity of your ministry is scarce, because they only going to show up. You only going to have momentum when it's time for conference. You only will probably have momentum, when it's time for your young adult weekend, right? After that, it's gone, because there's not a continuance of collaboration, right? So collaboration breeds continuity. So stay plugged and connected to the people that you lead, right? Where's my slide at? So let's talk about why the disengagement, right? Why the disengagement? Here's why. And I have a few tiers that we're going to unpack. Let's talk about approach. Approach, right? Approach is one of the main things that contribute to the disconnect, right? And this disconnect relates to, as it relates to engagement, is evident in our approaches, right? Approaches that are bound by tradition, that hinder the progression of young adult ministry, right? This disconnect and disengagement is seen and shows up, right, in a number of forms, right? Disconnection and disengagement shows up mind, body, and soul, right? They don't know how to make the connections, right? Between leader and leadership, between follower and leadership, disconnection in that approach, right? Between church and the world, right? Which can make ministry to young people a harder task than it really needs to be if there's these disconnects in these areas, right? These divides, however, I argue, can be diminished when we as young adult ministry practitioners build bridges rather than walls, right? Bridges will help young people apply faith to every dimension of their life, right? Walls confine us, right? Walls keep us in, walls restrict us, right? Confined, right? Bridges, however, connect us, right? So for so long, our approaches have built walls, right? In attempt, right? To keep us out of the world, to keep us in church, to keep us on this side, to keep us from the worldly agenda, right? Suggesting that God is not on the other side of the wall, right? So for so long, we've used walls to confine us and to keep us shut in, right? And this whole notion around walls has kept us so closeted in, right? To the point where young people don't know how to see God beyond the concept or the space of the church, right? And this has caused for so many young people to develop a fragmented spirituality, right? And a fragmented spirituality, right, is a spirituality that only impacts certain dimensions of our lives, right? Fragmented spirituality concludes that God only operates in one domain of my life, right? But he does not operate in other areas, right? And this is what walls in our approaches have created in the minds of young people as it relates to their spirituality, that God only shows up within the church, right? And the notion that God only operates within the parameters of the church has caused many young people to dismiss the idea that God can show up in school, that God can show up in community, that God can show up in home, right? That God can show up politically, that God can show up socially, that God can show up economically, right? They've dismissed that notion, right? And learned how to explore God beyond the confines of faith spaces, right? The whole idea of exploring God beyond the confines of the church is the unfamiliar idea, unfamiliar concept to young people, right? Hence robbing them from a spirituality that can impact every entity of their lives, right? So our approach has to be holistic so God can show up in every area of the lives of our young people, right? It has to be reimagined, right? Assumptions are another reason for the divide, right? What are some of the assumptions? Assumptions that what young people were taught, what young adults were taught as the young people or younger people was going to sustain them as adults, right? So you think because I went to VBS and because I went to Sunday school and because I grew up in the church that I don't need you don't need to reimagine your approach because I'm aging, right? It's been assumed because, you grew up in church, you good, right? It's been assumed that because church is being attended, lives are being changed, right? Another assumption that is made is that the majority of people, right, that lead in the capacity of youth or young adult ministry, right, we are giving up a baton, right, with the assumption that we're going to continue with the patterns of the past, right? These are things that has caused the divide and the disengagement of young people because we're giving batons, we're being passed, right? And if we think about, I know for me, when I came into the whole ministry of youth ministry, even while a teenager and somewhere in my early 20s, right? There was no template, right? My job was to do what had already been done and to keep doing it that way. Not reimagine what it's going to look like for my demographic, not reimagine what ministry should look like for me as a young person, because essentially I'm leading my peers, right? Another assumption is these assumptions, right, leave minimal room for innovation. It leaves minimal room for change, creativity, or even collaboration, right? The whole idea of, we've always done it this way, right? We've never, it's never been done before. Right. And I'm the type of person, you tell me it's never been done before, I'm going to do it. Right. Our approaches and these assumptions has caused and contributed to the disengagement of young people within the concept of the church, right? Another assumption is that while I am one who advocates for relevancy, I am one who says, no, we have to be innovative, we have to be forward thinking, we have to be adaptive, right? But we also have to remain the church. Right? There's an assumption that young people, we got to have this, we got to have smoke machines, we got to have lights, we got to have banners, we got to have all the LED lights, and we got to have all of these things, right? No, let the church be the church, right? Because young people, right, my peers, I have conversations with them all the time, right? They would rather the church just be the church. Why? Because we are always in pursuit of a sacred space for solace, right? The club does not offer solace, right? Let the club do what the club do, right? But the church needs to be where I come to be developed, for my faith to be fostered, for me to experience spiritual direction, right? So we shouldn't have to work. Another assumption is that, so aside from, let me just backtrack a little bit, right? When it comes to us being the church and remaining the church, is that we, make sure that we are not sending mixed messages, right? Young people know where to go. Our socials should never, that's just me. You could do what you want to do. But our social gatherings and our program when we're, attempting to, do things a little bit out the box, there's some things that our programming should not entail, right? We shouldn't serve alcohol at our program. Why? Because we know where to get alcohol, right? You should not come to church, come to pop up the ministry program like you popping out. No, this is church, right? We have our own agenda. The club has its own agenda, right? Another assumption, right, is that we shouldn't have to work this hard because young people grew up in church, right? That they don't, my favorite assumption is that young adult, they should be committed. They should be faithful. God forbid if you're single, you should be faithful, right? Because you don't have nothing to do. The blood of Jesus, right? I have a lot to do, right? Young people are entrepreneur. They are educated. They are out here being influential, right? There's so much going on in my life that, it's not that I'm not showing up because I don't have nothing to do, right? I have not found a space in here that contributes to these other areas that I'm made up of, right? So we had approach and assumption, right? The next one is affirmation. Affirmation, right? Today, young people, not everywhere, are treated as an expendable commodity, right? Presence is preferred over participation, right? I just want you to show up to church, right? I just want you to show up to church, right? Yeah, and you have, leaders and pastors. We have a lot of young people at our church, right? A lot of them aren't doing nothing, right? Right? Why? Because there's this notion, and this just is my thought and the way I think when I approach young adult ministry, right? There are seats for young adults, right? But there's not space for young adults, right? Seats suggest that you can occupy the space, right? Right? Space, when you make space for me, when you make room for me, you say I have voice and visibility here, right? That I don't just occupy the seat in the space, but I am seen and heard in the space, right? Affirmation, right? Affirm my presence, right? Think about innovative ways on how we can heighten, young adults' presence within congregational life, right? Affirmation, right? One of the things that we fail at, and this is just my experience. I only speak from my experience, right? This is where I've been let down in this area as it relates to affirmation concerning giftings, right? This is another contributor to the disengagement, that you don't affirm or acknowledge that I have a call on my life, right? You don't affirm, you don't see it, you don't acknowledge it, you don't cultivate it, right? So there's this disengagement that surfaces because I'm not being cultivated, right? And young people, and I know when I speak from my experience about when the Lord first called me, I was clueless on how to proceed forward as it relates to preparation. What do I do? Where do I go? Who do I talk to? What should I be doing? What are some things that I should be looking for to help confirm that I heard God, right? We have to stir gifts, right? And I have this philosophy that as a leader, right, those of us who lead young people, right, and we have to make sure that we are not portraying, for some of us who have had a tough time, not so much matriculating, but coming into their gifting, coming into their callings and being affirmed. Those of us who've had a tough time, a tough process as it relates to affirmation, that we don't replicate that same behavior, right? I am one that I make sure that anytime I identify a gift or see something brewing on the inside of young people, young adults, it is my responsibility to stir the gift, right? What's been happening is we've been burying gifts, right? So I like to use the metaphor of shovels and spoons, right? Shovels bury, but spoons stir, right? And for so long, young people have been encountering shovels in leadership rather than spoons. Right? We're encountering people who are burying, right, our gifting, who is burying our insurance, who is burying our confidence in what it is we believe God is asking us to, opposed to stirring it and say, you know what? Yes, that's there. Yes, that's you're right on task. You heard the Lord. You know what I'm saying? Here's what you need to do, right? So we have to decide, what are we gonna be, right? Are we going to be shovels and bury gifting, or spoons and stir giftings? Right? Affirmation. Right? So those things we just unpacked, that spoke to the reasoning around the disengagement, right? But, even all was not negative, because I'm here to present the hopeful side on how we can reimagine and reengage young people in the within faith spaces, right? So there's hope. There is hope. We go back. Oh yeah. There's hope, right? Hope is going to come through relationship, reconsideration, and revival, right? Relationship, right? We have to make sure that we are in relationship with those that we lead, right? That we are, before we can try to get them to participate in a conference, that we remind them and assure them that we care for them, that we care for their well-being, that we care for their spirits, that we care for what's happening in their lives, right? Relationship, right? Reconsideration, right? And I want to say one more thing about relationship, right? Even in being in relationship with those that you lead, don't get so caught up where familiarity fogs their perception of your positioning, right? That you can be friendly, you can be kind, you can be caring, right? But don't allow familiarity to consume you to the point that they perceive you differently, right? Reconsideration, right? I am a firm believer that we reconsider the contributions and those things that influence the lives of young people. We have to consider the cultures that are shaping and influencing young people's lives, right? Popular culture in particular, right, is one of the, if not top cultures or influences that is shaping the lives of young people. Everywhere we go, there's popular culture. It's seen in our fashion. It's seen in our music. It's seen in our food, what we eat. It's seen in the places that we go, right? We have to consider how culture is helping shape the identity of young people. And if we allow the healthy integration of popular culture in our program, we'll see just how much of a tool it is, not just to shaping the holistic identity of young people, but the spiritual identities of young people, right? Let me show you how powerful culture is, right? Culture entails, and if we don't reconsider these things, because young people have already considered how culture has influenced them and how they've learned to reimagine what culture is for the sake of their spirituality and their spiritual well-being, right? People will argue, you know what I'm saying, you know, they need to be in church on Sunday because, you know, church is down, church attendance is low because everyone's at brunch. So, right, there's something happening at brunch that's not happening at church, right? And when I go to brunch, right, you know, to me, it entails everything that a worship service entails, right? There's music, there's food, there's fellowship, there's dialogue, there's unity, right? There's affirmation. There's connectedness, right? My mind is present, my spirit is present, my body is present, right? You go to a concert, right? All of those things that church entails are presented in those spaces. So young people have even reimagined how they encounter spirituality, right? Revival, right? We have to ask God, Lord, give me a fresh perspective. Father, breathe on my vision. Give me a you know, send, you know, blow your spirit on this thing. Like, and it's important that we really seek God as it relates to our approaches. What should we be doing? Should we be doing this? You know, it's no longer, oh, well, they doing that over there. We know we could do that over there. No, you really have to seek God for what it is you should be doing for the people that you serve, right? Always don't be so event driven that you're not ministry driven. Right? Because we can have events after events after events after events, and the soul care of our young people, of young adults, is at stake. Right? We at the conference, we're at the convention, right? And they're still wrestling in their mind concerning their existence. Do I belong here? Right? So don't dismiss the notion of what revival can do, right, to your approaches in the lives of the young people that you serve. Key takeaways, right? Risk is required. So we was talking about reimagining, right? And I think that's at the core of this whole summit this weekend, right? This week, right? Rethinking, reimagining, right? Risk, right? LaKesha, they took a risk in pulling this off. It's a risk. People at home, it's even a greater risk because there's a fee, right? Nobody wants to pay for nothing that I'm sitting in the comfort of my living room. I need to be in the space for this magnitude of content and what's going to take place. I need to be in person, right? So they took a risk, right? Because risk is required for reimagining, right? If you're wrestling with the fact like, oh my God, is it going to work? Is it going to work? That's the very thing you should be doing. What are they going to say? You know, this has never been done before. Those are the very things that you should be doing, right? We have to reimagine how we're going to engage our young adults, right? Even as we are, I don't know where we are in this whole COVID situation. I really don't know where we are in it. You know, some days it looks like we're heading out. Some days looks like we're going backwards, right? But even as we reimagine re-entry, what How are our ministry approaches going to cater to where young adults are presently after having come through COVID, after having experiencing COVID, right? We have to take risks that is going to help us reimagine ministry, right? Engagement is a relational process. I cannot stress relationship enough, right? People don't want to care about nothing you got going on until they know you care for them, right? Engagement is a relational process, not a religious practice, right? Young adult ministry is more relational than religious, right? Because relationship is going to cause you to be there and be present for someone beyond the capacity of what it is that you've been assigned to do for them. Relationship, right? This is why, not to, sorry, I just, always got to give a reference to Jesus, right? He calls us into relationship before he offers us requirements on how to maintain relationship with him, right? He calls us into relationship first before he makes suggestions and gives us a template of requirements of what it means to be a follower and discipleship of Jesus, right? Discipleship requires relationship. You can't disciple young people that you are not in relationship with, right? When you're in relationship, they trust you, right? They feel safe, right? They believe you, right? So engagement is not it's a relational, not religious, right? And that may contradict some of your beliefs about approaches to young adult ministry, but engagement is only coming through relationship, right? And a lot of young people aren't engaged because they are not, one, in relationship. And I won't say they're not in relationship with Jesus, because we cannot equate church attendance with one's relationship with Jesus, right? But when you're in relationship with the community, you show up, right? So when young people aren't in relationship with the faith space, they're not going to show up to the faith space, right? When they're not in relationship with their leadership, they're not going to show up for no programming that the leadership implements, right? So before you try to get them to do a conference, let them know that you care, right? Let them know that you care. And yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you. Right. So I left some space out. I don't know how much time I have left, but if you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. So reimagining, and the book, I forgot to add a bibliography, but the book is Teaching to Transgress. By Bell Hooks is where I adapted this philosophy and this framework from around engaged pedagogy. And pedagogy just simply means, the practice of teaching, right? That's all it means, right? And how can we apply a practice of teaching and learning, right, between the people that we lead, right? That we're not, and in that practice and in that exchange, that there's equal exchange, right? And also, the whole notion around pedagogy of engagement suggests that young people are active participants in their faith development, right? That's also what engagement looks like, that I'm not just talking to you, that you're not a container, right? And for so long, we treat young adults and young people like containers where we could just spew information in them and never give them an opportunity to make deposits, right? I learned best how to lead the people I lead by including them on what it is that I'm doing, giving them an opportunity to share in the experience, because it's not just mine, it's our experience, right? I don't have a position, I don't have work to do or people to do it for if young people are not included in the process, if they're not engaging in the process, right? So the whole notion of a pedagogy of engagement suggests that it is a sync and a communal effort, that young adult ministry is all we're all driving it. That it's not just one person, we're all driving it. And young people today, essentially now in this hour, are me, right? I'm gonna speak for myself. We're looking for a space where we can belong, be seen, be heard, right? Be engaged, right? Be stirred and not buried, right? So I pray that this was helpful. Here's where you can reach me. Please stay connected. I am a private consultant, and I do consult around these topics on how to reimagine ministry for youth and young adults. I offer this same service to academic settings where I go in, how do we reimagine education, right, for our young people to ensure that they are getting the most out of what it is that God has graced us to do. Let me see if we have any questions, but thank you. Yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah. So thank you. I think that's my time. If you have any questions, feel free. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. So yeah, let's reimagine this. Let's reimagine this thing, right? You know, especially those who essentially who pastor their peers. You know, what do you want ministry? And I asked a few friends the other day, you know, who are young adults, like, what should ministry to you look like? You know, if you weren't leading, what should ministry to you look like? Right? Because we're so busy leading. A lot of us are so busy leading that we're not being ministered to. Right? So we're pouring, and no one is pulling up, you know, with the pitcher to you know, no one's on standby to pour back into us, right? Like Cracker Barrel, you know, as soon as your cup get low, that boy just pull up and just pour, right? We need people like that, even as we are leading. And as young adults, essentially, we need people to pour back into us. So while we're ministering, we need ministry as well. So let's reimagine. Let's reimagine young adult ministry. Dating circles, man. We ain't even talk about dating. We didn't even talk about dating. Yeah, it gets weird. It gets weird, and young adult settings can get really weird, and that's why it takes, you know, those who's really been graced and called to do it to lead it. Right, those who's gonna take it serious, those who not just trying to be in position just to be in position. You know, you really have to. It's a charge. It's a charge. I think young adult, you know, that whole 18 to 30, you know, 40 to me is a very crucial time in the lives of younger youth and young adults. And I think, you know, you need ministry that will help sustain you as you transition through life and maneuver through life.